So I was pretty late to the hydrangea game, but the only reason why is because they're actually not great plants to grow indoors unless you're forcing them. But now that we have a little bit of land, I started to get into hydrangeas and realized that we have about 15 species and cultivars across 5 of the main categories of hydrangea that you could get on the market. There's obviously more species than that, and there's definitely way more cultivars than that as well. I'm standing outside this one right now, which is a Hydrangea paniculata. This one is Little Quickfire, but actually we called this garden shorthand the hydrangea garden because the first foundational plantings that we planted in here are hydrangeas. Now, I found out that deer absolutely love eating hydrangeas, and some of them are more responsive to pruning than others. But we'll go over the 5 main categories first. We have Hydrangea paniculata, or the panicle hydrangea, as I mentioned. We have, if you come over here, Hydrangea quercifolia. This is actually one of our native hydrangeas to the United States, except this is a bit more of a southern species. Now there are cultivars that are hardy to our zone in particular, so we're a zone 5-6. So you just have to pay attention to the cultivars of quercifolia because you might be planting a quercifolia that is not as cold hardy as another one. I particularly love this one. Then we have Hydrangea arborescens. Many of these are the lace cap, some of them are mop head varieties. And this one is a great pollinator. You'll see some of the sterile florets right here and some of the inflorescences. I really like this one in particular. We have Hydrangea serrata, which is this one right here. And this is also called serrated or mountain hydrangea. And this happens to be an Asian variety, as is the Hydrangea paniculata. And then the other one that we'll show you later is Hydrangea macrophylla, which is the big leaf hydrangea, and that happens to be one of the more popular hydrangeas because there is a wealth of color as far as the inflorescences and flowers go. And if we think about why people love hydrangeas, it has to be for the flowers. It's a little less for the leaves and more for the flowers. And if we take a look at some of the old school hydrangeas, and I see them planted immensely in the landscape or in old botanic gardens, they're usually quite droopy, they're quite big, some would say oafish maybe, and the wild types are a bit more airy and ungainly, and they have been bred over many, many decades to get these more compact varieties with stronger stems, even big flowers, but strong stems that can hold up some of the big inflorescences. Now, the native kind, the arborescens, which is actually native up towards New York, this one is a cultivated variety called Invincible Lace. They're also known commonly as smooth hydrangeas, by the way. These happen to be extremely pollinator friendly because, as you could see, the florets are like a dish. They just kind of are.
A helicopter landing pad.
Yeah, it's just a nice helicopter landing pad, as Saunders said. And you could see, again, that these look like the flowers, but these are the sterile florets, and then all the inflorescences are here. Obviously, this is past its prime of flowering. Otherwise, you'd see bees and flies and a number of others on this hydrangea. Then you have the panicle kind, and we have a big panicle down at the meadow house, which we'll show you afterwards. And these also are interesting to the pollinators, but you could see that the ones here are the ones that attract the pollinators. So in the ones, this one is a bit more airy, but the panicled one that we have down in the meadow house, you'll see it's more of a cone or pyramid shape, and you can't see any of the fertile flowers underneath, and you'll just see pollinators go in and then they just disappear because they're like going in underneath the sterile florets. And you're starting to see like many different flower shapes. We have the lace cap, you have mop head, you have these cone-shaped ones, pyramid-shaped, dome-shaped, and everything in between, especially as you start to hybridize them. Here's another of the serrata types, and this one has not been a reliable plant that flowers for me, and I think I'll share some of the reasons why. It's also on the edge of our zone, so these are usually good for zone 6 to 9, and we're on that edge of 5, 6. But also, as I had mentioned, these had a significant deer browse, and not all hydrangeas take well to pruning. Over here, we have another paniculata type. This is the one that I'm gonna start planting down in the meadow house. It's actually a nice small one. It's usually a 3x3. And this one is called Bobo. And it has this really nice pyramidal conical shaped flower. And there's also another cultivated variety called Pufferfish that has a similar shape to Bobo, but the flowers or the panicles are quite big and quite generous. So that's an interesting one. It might be another one that I think about in the future. And people love the color of the hydrangea. So you see most of them are white, but then as they are pollinated, some of them will fade to a pink or red. Some of the quercifolia types have really red flowers. So there's a cultivated variety, I believe this one is called Ruby Slippers, and we'll see one down at the meadow house that has also really red leaves. So quercifolia means like an oak, or foliage like an oak, and you could see that they have oak leaves like this. And unfortunately this one was browsed by deer, so I'm not sure if I'm going to get flowers this time around. There's a few different types of pruning types of hydrangea, and that's what you really need to pay attention to, because you might actually be cutting off the buds. So if we look at Hydrangea paniculata and Hydrangea arborescens, these are plants that bloom on new wood. So what does that mean? New wood essentially means all the new growth this year. So these are ones that you could judiciously prune down to maybe 6 to 12 inches, or quite frankly, you can not even prune it at all. If you really want to do lazy gardening, you don't even have to prune this, because you'll see some of the old stems in here. They just push past these old stems and all the new growth shoots up. So that's an easy way to garden. Now, there are Hydrangea serrata types, again, the mountain hydrangeas, that actually bloom on both new wood and old wood. So that means any of the new growth it'll start to bloom on, and any of the old growth it'll bloom on as well. So if you do prune these, I would only do minimal pruning back to the first set of healthy buds, or no pruning at all. And this was eaten down by deer. Now that we have a deer fence, we haven't had any incursions whatsoever. So again, these years we might not see some flowers, or for the fact that this may be too cold of winters and it dies back as well. So that might be why I don't see any flowers on this one. And
Will it flower next year?
it could flower next year, unless the winter is too cold. So if you prune off that old growth, those old growth on the buds, you will skip a season of flowering. Now, I covered the arborescens and I covered the paniculata, but the quercifolia type, which again is this oak leaf type, and the macrophylla, which I'll be showing you shortly, the big leaf type, these only bloom on old wood. So again, last season's growth. So if that last season's growth was cut, which this one was. Look how far down it was cut because the deer ate it. So this is all this season's growth. Chances are this is not going to bloom. However, I'm going to show you a bloom down in the meadow house so that you could see what the quercifolia bloom looks like. This is probably the type of hydrangea that I have the most of here on the land, and it's simply because I really love the shape of the leaf. I think the flower is really pretty, and the fall foliage color on this is like this really rich burgundy red, which looks so beautiful. This has a tendency to spread out a bit more, but they have some smaller varieties like Munchkin and a number of others that are a bit smaller, but they make great foundational plantings. Some folks will plant them just as hydrangeas and hydrangea, and nothing else. In this garden, I basically just wanted to dot them throughout, and hopefully these will start to get bigger. So most of them are, like in the case of the serrata that Saunders filming right now, that's more of a 3 foot by 3 foot. And these paniculata and the arborescens types in the quercifolia are more like 4 to 5 feet high by 4 to 5 feet wide. But let's head down to the meadow house and I'll show you some macrophylla types and our big paniculata down there. So we're down at the meadow house and you can see this is our hydrangea paniculata in full bloom. And as you can see here, it's trained as a standard tree. So it looks really beautiful, but most hydrangeas are actually shrubs. In fact, most of the ones that I had mentioned are shrubs. You have, in some cases, some species are climbing vines, but this is a paniculata type. And as you may be able to see, some of the pollinators, they're getting attracted to these sterile florets, but behind there are these sweet smelling fertile flowers, and that they just basically crawl in and pollinate. And sometimes you don't even know where they go. It's like they're going behind the cloak, but it's pretty cool to see. So this plant, like the lace cap varieties, is a really good pollinator plant. You just don't see the pollination happening because it's kind of obscured by these large florets. Now you'll see that there's some dried flowers. These are all nice and crispy right now, but during the fall and winter, they hold their flowers. It's kind of like a brown color. These in particular start off as green-white, go to a creamy white, and then fade into a pink. And you'll start to see some of those pollinators, as I mentioned. They go into these little sterile florets, and then they go into the fertile flowers down below, and they just kind of disappear into these panicles, which is pretty cool. So this is just as pollinator friendly as the lace cap varieties, but you just don't see how many pollinators get into here. But what I was going to say is that people love the flowers. These have this nice change of color, and then in the fall and the winter, they hold on to their dried flowers, which is really pretty. However, you may want to remove those, and I'll tell you why. I've learned my lesson on this tree. If the flowers, you can see how big they are still on, some days we get those really wet, heavy snows. And the snow piles up not only on the branches, but on the flowers themselves, and it could crack these brittle stems. So I think it was right here and right here, you'll see some past damage of stems or trunk, like part of the tree branches that we've had to actually remove. You'll see some new growth here where it was is broken. You could see that this is not really that strong as well. And so as a tree, you know, should they be trained as a standard? I mean, like I said, it looks pretty, but you may want to go the extra mile, and in the fall and winter, instead of looking at some of those beautiful papery flowers, you might want to take them off. But again, panicle hydrangeas, they are just like arborescens. They flower on new wood, so cutting these off is not a big deal at all. You could cut them off without fearing that you're going to be cutting off any of the buds. Now I mentioned that folks really love the flowers and the possible color change. As I mentioned, this one starts off as maybe a limey green, and then it goes to this creamy white, and then as it gets pollinated and it approaches fall, you can start to see that it gets these like pink shades. So it's really pretty. However, these are not the ones that change color based on the acidity of the soil. So if we go over here, you'll see some macrophylla types, which I didn't have planted up there, but we're going to be planting some today. Here's some macrophylla types. These are some new cultivars. This one is called Fairy Trail White, and I don't have any flowers to show you, unfortunately, on this, so I'm just going to have to throw them up in an image on the screen. But again, macrophylla, big leaf, and they have some really beautiful flowers. This happens to be white, and I have one that is called, this is another Fairy Trail Fresco. That Fresco one happens to be a bit bluish or pink, depending on the acidity of the soil. Now, macrophyllas and some serratas are the ones that change color based on soil acidity. So you could actually see here I have Espoma's bag with the soil acidifier, which I'll use for like blueberries or huckleberries, anything in the Vaccinium family. But you could see right on here, turns hydrangeas blue. Now, we generally have a 6.5 to 7, so it's acidic to a little bit neutral soil. So chances are we're going to have, I would say, a white to slightly pink. We would have to really acidify the soil to like a 5 to 6 pH in order to get that blue color. So what happens from a soil chemistry standpoint is as the soil starts to acidify or become lower in pH, it frees up some aluminum ions. And aluminum then becomes more soluble, and then the plant is able to take up the aluminum ions, particularly if there's aluminum in the soil, which usually there is some aluminum. And it takes up the aluminum in the soil and it interacts with the anthocyanins in the flowers. Now, anthocyanins are typically in the shade of pinks, reds, and purples. So when the aluminum ions become more soluble and are taken up by the flower and they interact with the anthocyanins, it starts to shift the color of the flowers to be a more purple or blue color. So that's really how it happens. When it's sweeter soil and it's more alkaline and it's higher on the pH scale, all those aluminum ions get locked up in the soil and is not available for the plant. So then that pink and the reds come out in those anthocyanins in the flower. So that's why in an alkaline soil you have a pinker or redder flower versus a bluer flower. For me, I don't really care what color it is. I mean, up there I preferred a pinker shade because most of the flowers up there were white and pink. I'm going to show you this quercifolia, though, that we planted here. And this will give you an idea of what the flowers look like, because this wasn't deer browsed. The ones up there were deer browsed, so we're probably going to skip a year of flowers there. And you could also see what the leaves look like when it starts to approach either hot weather or the fall weather, even cool weather or hot weather or fall weather. It starts to get this really beautiful burgundy red shade. So I absolutely love it. Like I said, if I had to choose out of all the different types of hydrangeas, I think I like the quercifolia, and I have the most of it in the landscape. I will be doing foundational plantings in this section. So I've started to plant some more perennials in. We have some bulbs that are coming in. And if you recall the hydrangea bobo that I showed you up there, I have probably 3 or 4 bobos that I'm going to be planting in here, and then a quercifolia munchkin that I'll be planting in the border plants among the perennials. So that will be a later project. And the project that we're going to get on with today is planting up these macrophyllas. Like I said, these are new cultivars that actually happen to cascade over. So this is maybe some of the ones that would look really great in containers. And again, I'll have to throw some photos up of what it looks like, but they do get quite large, you know, so some of them will get 3-4 feet wide and they'll start to cascade over, you know, if you have a stone wall or something, that could look really nice. So I have these 2 frescoes and I have 2 Fairy Trail whites. And I think these have been out in the European market for a while and they're relatively new to the US market. And this is Fairy Trail Bride. So what I'd like to do is plant 2 in that container, and then the containers around the meadow house are looking really tired. I planted just 1 simple grass in the containers around the meadow house, and so I'm going to replenish those. You can see how tired these look. And we got a sunflower seed, so I think our chippy might be a little sad that we're removing all his sunflowers. Maybe we could salvage this and plant this up elsewhere. You can see he has a whole cache of them right here. These should be hardy. They're usually a zone 5, 6 to a zone 9. Most hydrangeas are. The lace cap varieties like the arborescents are hardy from usually a zone 4 to 9. So what I'd like to do is maybe plant some of these.
More plants.
Plant delivery. It's probably the rest of my hydrangea bobos.
Oh, you should go check them.
Should we go check?
Well,
not right now. After we're done. I want to say a pickup on the soil acidifier. You can't just put this in the soil and expect it to turn blue overnight. It's going to take weeks. So it takes a while to change pH of soil. It's easier to do obviously in a container. All right, so this one is the Hydrangea Fairy Trail Fresco. And you can see that on this one it looks like it's blue, but it will either be blue or pink depending on what kind of soil you have. Yeah, these look really tired. And most hydrangeas want moist but well-draining soil. So if it's too wet, you're gonna have probably some fungal diseases or bacterial diseases. Now, I don't know if these will bloom this year, because I think normally the macrophyllus bloom in spring through summer, and we're getting into like late summertime. And I'm just going to use some Espoma potting medium here. And on hot days like this, I usually will water the plants in. Now again, if you're gonna want some blue flowers, then you could add the acidifier and keep on adding over the course of a number of weeks.
yeah, how much and how regular do you?
Well, it'll say on the back, I just follow basically the directions. So with potted plants, it says 1 tablespoon for each 4 inches of pot diameter. And then if you're using it as a fertilizer, it says 1/2 cup per 100 square feet. So, and mind you, some of these plants, if you're buying them in the store, they're often forced to flower at unseasonal times. Those plants are typically a bit weaker, and if you're going to transplant them out into the landscape, then you have to be careful with transplanting them because they will have flowered usually at a time when they're not usually flowering. On this side, I'd like to get some fairy trails because I was feeling like that oregano, I only had enough oregano for one side. And this could look really cool coming down here. And now we might not get those flowers, like I said. And again, macrophyllus and serratas are the kind that will change color of their flowers with the acidity. And serrata blooms on new and old wood, and macrophylla only blooms on old wood or last season's buds. So again, you want to be really careful with pruning. Don't prune very judiciously, only prune back to maybe the best bud, the best first bud. I have another quercifolia. This is a Quercifolia munchkin, and it's one of the ones that grows a little smaller than that one, which is ruby slippers. And then this one is Hydrangea Fairy Trail Bride. And I might attempt to plant this in the landscape or in another pot, but I'm going to do that later. Let's just check what FedEx dropped off because it might be my hydrangea bobos. Oh, and another FedEx. Oh, he's just turning around.
Man, how many plants do you order?
Jeez. Nah, this is T, but let's see what he has. He's like, wait, I was just here, but I forgot to deliver.
Nah, this is a different truck.
We have 2 FedEx trucks.
How's it going?
Great, how are you?
Good. Just got this one here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Oh, plants. I think this is your computer.
Yeah,
So you can edit all the plants.
I can edit this video on my new computer.
Everything she did in one.
Wow, I thought it was my hydrangea bobos coming in. So there's so many different reasons why hydrangeas may not bloom. We've already covered some of that. If you've pruned it incorrectly, especially ones that don't grow on new wood, so the ones that grow on last year's buds, if you've pruned too much of it, or even if you didn't prune it, if the deer pruned it or some other animal has pruned it, then you may not actually get flowers that year. I would say a second reason that you might not get any flowers is if it's too cold of a winter and the cultivar that you chose is maybe not as hardy to your zone, so it dies back to the roots. That could be another great example. And then probably one of the last reasons why it may not bloom in any given year is if you have a tendency to fertilize it with too much nitrogen. Now, a nitrogen fertilizer is not bad, but it depends on the season. So if it's about to bloom, I would say hold off on putting any fertilizer that is too high in nitrogen because it may then favor the leaves and not the flowers. So I would say fertilizing in early spring, fertilizing after the buds have been set and the flowers are on the plant, and then maybe fertilizing in late summer would be fine if you're going to fertilize the plant at all. And usually having a balanced fertilizer or one that is a little higher on the phosphorus or the P, because that phosphorus will actually boost the blooms as well. So those would be 3 different reasons, or maybe 4 different reasons depending on pruning, if an animal pruned it or you pruned it, why you might not get a flower set. But most of the time, hydrangeas are exceptionally reliable. And again, just look at the different cultivars, especially with the quercifolia types. I'm in a zone 5-6, and as I shared, some of those cultivars are better in southern temperatures versus one in more northern climates. But that's all about hydrangeas. There's so many amazing ones that are out there, so many different species and cultivated varieties. I mean, hundreds of different types. So there's probably one that is perfect for your landscape as well.